I have the privilege of being able to introduce today's speakers and moderators, and I'll go through each of them in turn now. We have Chat Garcia Romilio from the Philippines. She's a specialist in gender, women's rights, and ICTs with the Alliance for Progressive Communication. She recently has managed a 9-country program looking to empower women across those countries in Asia. And she is currently the chair of the board for the Center of Migrant Advocacy. Amal Fahmy from Egypt is co-founder of Harass Map, an exciting initiative that is mapping and seeking to disrupt sexual harassment in the city of Cairo. She's the lead researcher of that initiative, looking at the effectiveness of crowdsourced data. She has experience with the UN Population Fund, World Health Organization, and degrees from the American University in Cairo and London School of Economics. Joanne Veron Ferraz joins us from Brazil. She is founder and director of Coding Rights, a think tank on the implications of openness, privacy, and freedom of expression. She's a legal advocate on governance and digital rights in Brazil, including the issues of intellectual property and development. And she recently had 4 years of experience with the Fundación Gutilio Vargas. Finally, our moderator, who you'll see in just a moment, is Chelly Singha from Canada and the IDRC. She is a senior program officer and a specialist in global health and ICTs. Her own experience spans Bhutan, Haiti, and Asia, particularly looking at how information systems can lead to better healthcare delivery and patient outcomes. She has degrees in management of information systems and international affairs. So without further ado, I turn this now over to Chelly to introduce our topic and carry it on from here. Chelly.
Thank you, Bruce, for that great introduction. I'm very honored to be here moderating this panel, not only because of the expertise and experience that our excellent speakers are going to bring to bear, but also because of the timeliness and the importance of this particular topic. Just to cite some statistics from UN Women, the 2013 Global Review found that 35% of women worldwide have experienced either physical and/or sexual, intimate partner or non-partner sexual violence. However, many national studies find these numbers are considerably higher. Let me reiterate, these are reported numbers, but as we know, many of these incidents go unreported for a number of reasons, such as stigma, blaming the victim, fear of retribution, fear of inaction, and a range of other potential reasons. We also know that gender-based violence, although it affects women disproportionately, it's not an issue that only touches women or only affects women or should only be discussed when we talk about women. Gender-based violence requires discussions about behaviors and actions of women and men, and it can also affect men as well as women. So it's very important for us to discuss gender-based violence as an inclusive topic for both women and men in order for us to be able to curb this troubling phenomenon. And questions about how can voices of victims, their families, and bystanders be heard, but most importantly, be listened to and respected, are questions that often come to mind when we hear of certain incidents and certain stories. Over the past 2 decades, there has been an incredible growth of the use of ICTs, particularly mobile phones, in many parts of the world. Today, many countries boast over 100% penetration rate. But as we know, ICTs are just tools. And tools, yes, they're important, but they alone cannot catalyze or cannot hinder positive or negative change. They are dependent on other enabling actors and factors, policies, and people. These are the issues that are at the core of the discussion that we'll be hearing about today from our panelists. So before I hand things over to them and ask them to comment on the statement that is framing this debate, let me just share a couple of words about logistics before we get started. This is a debate, as you've seen, but it's not a classical debate in the sense that there are sides that are for the topic and other sides that are against. Each speaker will be talking to both sides of the topic, and they'll be pulling out and drawing out nuances and variations around these topics. So it's a little bit of a different sort of debate. My role as a moderator is to summarize to clarify, at times probe the speakers, and to relay any questions from the online audience. And I could see the sunshine is streaming in from the window here. Also, my role is a timekeeper, so I want to make sure that everyone has enough time to express their thoughts and that there's a fair allocation of time, not only across the speakers, but also to ensure time for you, the audience members, to share your thoughts and to ask your questions to the speakers. We do encourage active participation from the audience, and we will be accepting questions in all the following languages: English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Arabic. You will see there's a Q&A box at the side of the Hangout in which you can pose your questions. However, the debate itself will be carried out in English. And for any of you who pose questions that we don't have time to get to today, we encourage you to visit our blog and to ask the questions, because the speakers and myself will be on the blog responding to some of those in the coming days and weeks. So, with that setting the tone, let me ask each of our three panelists to comment on this statement. Be it resolved, ICTs have the potential to change social norms and behaviors. And as I said before, they will be speaking to many aspects of that statement. So I will be letting each speaker talk for 2 minutes, and then we'll start with Chat, and then move to Amel, and then Joanna. So Chat, please.
Hi, good evening. It's evening where I am in Manila. Yeah, I think I'd like to point out three things in relation to that statement, and I will speak for and against it, or the contradictions in the statement, if you like. So I think the first thing is around access. I think one of the things that you did say is that it does, is that there is still very unequal access for women and girls. So in that sense, I think it does, it already skews the access of the possibilities for changing social norms in a situation where you have 200 million fewer women on the internet. I think also access, as we know, it's not only about who can afford what, but it's also about who has the ability to access information technology. So I think that's one thing that already impacts on social norms. The second thing is that on one hand, we have seen how technologies, ICT, the internet, has created opportunities, new public spaces, new expressions for women, and that in some sense it has a potential to really to correct, the historical exclusion of women in public spaces or in terms of expression. And we've seen so many of those, women getting online, women being able to produce their own content, women being able to have access to publish, etc. online, where they were not able to before. But I think one of the issues that we're seeing now is that because of the explosion of the internet, there's also been much more control. There's also been much more content that polices content and controls sexual speech, for example. And I think that's when you say, there's much more violence. There is also hate speech. In fact, it's actually quite concerning, the level of misogyny online. And I think we're seeing that trend. That seeks to silence women. It doesn't really matter where they are, whether they're in high public position or in ordinary women. It's the same. It's women experience violence online or hate speech in similar ways. I think that's one area. And I think one of the things that we find is that these issues seem to be, one of the difficulties here is the ability, or we're not familiar. It's not easy to actually find redress in relation to violence online. So I think those are some of the issues that you'll find. So there's pluses and minuses here, and I do think that while there is that potential and there is that change, there's also a backlash there, and I think it does reflect generally what we have. offline, if you like.
Thank you, Chat. Amel.
Hi, everybody. It's quite interesting. Question is pretty complex. One is, can ICT change social norms? But the other question I would add, would it change it to the better or change it to the worse? Or, for me, ICT is a very kind of it's a neutral tool. It can be like any other innovation. It can be used for the good. It can be used to bad. It can change things to better. It can change things to worse. It's like an airplane who basically can take loved one or can drop a bomb on loved one. So the thing is like, I believe that sometimes even openness, the non-censorship openness in some of the platform can actually be a way to actually exercise censorship, because it's so open and because there is a lot of violent expressions there and words and misogynies. People are excluded. LGTB are excluded from these forms. Women are excluded in these forms. So when we say changing of social norm, we have to say that there is a positive change and there is also a negative change. And I have one reflection on one of the statements you said earlier about the importance of looking at gender with ICT, and gender does not mean women. And I totally agree, and I'm very pro male involvement, minority groups involvement. But as a feminist myself, I also want to stress there is important to address women's in particular with ICT. Because if you looked at statistics, it tells us that the most groups that are exposed to or suffer from the abuse and the stalking and the online harassment are mainly women. There are less men, more women, more minority groups than men. So so yes, we totally have to address gender as both women and men, but we have to also be sensitive about women's needs and women benefits and women suffers and women exploitation in ICT. I would like to say that there have been evidence-based that ICT have improved women's life. There have been projects from all over the world where actually the use of ICT provide voice for the voiceless, helped women to be more politically active, helped women, especially in cases of domestic violence, providing information on sexual and reproductive health, providing counseling online. The anonymity of the ICT and the web in particular have provided women with information needed, with solutions that they would have never accessed it otherwise. So yes, it can provide a more positive impact. Yes, it can change social norm, but as much as it can change things for the better, you have to also be careful about changing things for worse for women.
Thank you very much, Amal. Yes, please, go on, Joanna.
Hello, everyone. In agreement with the other colleagues, I do agree that the usage of ICTs can build capacities and create societies where individuals' potential can be realized. In the chapter of development ideas, we addressed that, particularly bringing the approach of Amartya Sen for development, in which he emphasizes the importance of political freedoms, economic facilities, social opportunities, transparencies, and other factors that allow individuals to make choices free from the interference of the others. And I think ICTs can be an enabler for that. But as Shad has pointed, we have an issue of digital divide, and the digital divide has several gaps, which includes the gender one, and in terms of both, in terms of access, how many women are accessing those technologies, but not only. Women are also underrepresented in the sector as creator. creators of the technologies and in decision-making processes of ICT companies. So men hold most of the top jobs in the sector, while women are pretty much underrepresented and occupy only the lower level of ICT occupations, and that's true for both developed and developing countries. So I think the point that I want to add, besides the issue of access, the issue of hate speech that was already addressed, is that one. Women as also developers of technologies is an issue, because technologies are not neutral. They are too, and they are built and designed for particular goals and with particular aspects. So I think this is one point that was not still addressed that I could add in that stage.
Thank you very much, Joanna. So I've taken notes of all of the interesting things that the three of you have said, but before I share some of my reflections, I'm going to give each of you 1 minute to respond to reflect on what you've heard from your fellow speakers. So how about this time we start with, we'll go in the same order. So we'll go Chat, Amel, and then Joanna. So just 1 minute this time as a response or reaction to what you've heard.
Yeah, you know, I think I want us to look a little bit more about the statement about the ICTs being gender neutral. I don't think so. I don't think technologies are gender neutral. I think technologies have been developed, shaped with are very gendered. In fact, the way, you know, it's not only about access. It's not only access that's gendered, it's also the kinds of technologies or the kinds of gadgets, for example, or the kinds of applications that are being developed. All of these are gendered in the sense of, you know, it's being what for example, games. Look at how games are developed. It's, you know, it's totally gendered. So I would say that it is not just about, it is about the way that technologies are shaped. And historically, technologies, if you've seen in analysis of historically how technologies have been shaped, that it really has much of technology have been gendered in the sense of, you know, like development of even farming equipment, even what is being, the kinds of technologies are being developed. So I do think that ICTs as well are quite gendered.
Thank you, Chat. Amel, would you mind sharing your 1 minute of reaction, please?
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. Actually, I would like to dwell more on the underrepresentation of women as creator of the technology. And I think it's a so important point that we need to later discuss further and see and become part of our focus and our work. We should work towards this, encouraging more women to be a developer of creating of technology, because in the way I see it, the more women will be involved, the more we would decrease the digital gap, the more we will take women's technical need into consideration when we develop ICT platform. So I think it's a very important point, and it's a great addition to what we have.
Thank you. Joanna, can we have your reaction, please?
Yes, coming back to the issue on hate speech and sexual speech online, I wonder what the others think about the balance of freedom of expression, privacy protection, and avoiding hate speech online, because I work a lot on privacy and I'm a privacy advocate, and also on anonymity. I also advocate for anonymity, but I know it's a contentious topic when it comes to hate speech. So it's something that I would like to hear more from the others while this conversation evolves. I think that's it.
Thank you. Wow. It's going to be difficult for me to summarize, and I'm not going to try to summarize, but I think there were some points that came up that in the initial round that people picked up on. I found it interesting that some people had mentioned ICTs are gender neutral, other people that they are not gender neutral, but even though they were saying contradictory statements, the way in which you were talking about it, you were actually saying the similar thing, that, you know, when one was saying that it is neutral, saying, well, it's a tool, and it depends on the hands within which it falls into. It depends on how it is used, what is the content. And the ones that were saying it's not neutral were saying precisely similar things, that, you know, the way in which ICTs themselves are designed, which is something Chat was saying, that, you know, whether it's technologies of various natures, it's not just the way it's used, but it's also the way it's designed and the application. So I found that very interesting. The other point that I think, Amal, you mentioned, which was interesting, that you said ICTs and the internet are so open that people get excluded, which I thought that was a very fascinating statement, because, you know, it sounds a little bit like an oxymoron. Well, if it's so open, then how are people excluded? But of course, we see it happening all the time, that despite the internet being open, the content is still managed, and it's being geared towards perhaps dominant social groups, and that can lead to exclusion. And then also, just a comment. I think some of the points about women being creators of knowledge and generators of knowledge also come back to this idea of you know, who are the ICTs being used for. And I've noticed that, and this is a segue into our next question for you, that most of your comments stayed in the realm of the online. So whether it was hate speech, or whether it was, you know, thinking about sharing and having that openness to share ideas, or on the other side, having ideas censored or having it policed, it really stayed in the realm of the online. And we haven't yet gone into the world of also the non-online, and maybe the interface between non-online and online. So the next question is really going to be asking about your experience, because the three of you bring very interesting sets of experience to bear on this topic. So what I would like to ask you is, in your experience, under what circumstances have you seen ICTs used as tools for either oppression, so ways of excluding, of silencing women and other groups, increasing misogyny, allowing for hate speech, propagating hate speech, etc., or for liberation? These are very strong words, oppression or liberation. So liberation would be opening up new spaces for self-expression for women, challenging some of the dominant social norms that might not be open to some attitudes towards women, but also other groups. And also some experience about what practitioners are doing to address these either forms of oppression or forms of liberation. So this time what we'll do is we'll reverse the order. So Joanna, we'll begin with you, and then we'll move to Amal. Sorry, this is very unplanned. And then we'll go to Chat. So again, if you can please take, this time we'll ask you to take 4 minutes, because we also want you to share a little bit about your organization and your work, as well as opining about the statement itself. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna bring some examples. I'll share a slide of cases that go has to do of what I said, of the developing environment and working environment of ICTs, and it goes with your question of online and offline. So there is this case that was recently decided on Ellen Powell. It was a case in the Silicon Valley on gender discrimination. in retaliation, was a lawsuit against a ICT firm. And she lost the case, but she put the conversation about sexism in the Silicon Valley, in the media, in the social networks. And I think it was an important point to an important case, considering what I said on how women are not participating enough in the development of those technologies that are not neutral. And when they do, it's not the less, it's a hostile environment sometimes. Another case, it's video games. Last year we saw a big problem of misogyny surrounding this Gamergate debate. And it was basically, the case was journalists that were writing about misogyny in games, and got furious reactions. Even in the offline environment, they had to flee their houses due to threats that they received from actually young teenagers, male teenagers, that were against them writing about misogyny in games and how the women are portrayed in games. And another case that very similar, that's going on in Brazil, was also a journalist that wrote about sexism in forums and chants, and she has also been harassed and had to go away from her home, and yeah, very outrageous. So I think those are experiences that very recent and that we are seeing all around. It has to do on how technology has been appropriated, how it's the question of access is mostly appropriated by men, and then how women are portrayed in those technologies or forums or chats or video games. So this is something to pay attention on. And coming to the question on what I'm trying to do about that is I'm experimenting actually with coding rights. It's a think tank that I'm just forming, and the idea is exactly to bring women from different fields, from research and policy strategy for digital rights, from communications and advocacy, from art and creativity, but also geeks and technologists, to work together in a board in which we can brainstorm about projects that we want to fulfill. It's mostly on digital rights and visualizations and using technologies to think about rights, but which is what I do. But I want to have this board as an experiment. What if we start to think policies, digital policies, and develop tools and think about developing tools in a board or advisors that's just formed by women? Is something different coming up or not? So this is an experiment that I'm starting as an organization. So there'll be more soon. The list of wonderful women that I've been reaching out, it will publish online soon in the next weeks or so. I'll stop here and then we keep talking. I think my time is gone.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. Amal. Amal, can you hear me? Yes. Oh, Amal, I think your microphone might be on mute. There we go.
Okay, it's better? Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Thank you. You have mentioned 3 points, online, offline activities, ICT as being oppressive and liberating. And I try to address these 3 points from the experience of HarassMap. As HarassMap is an initiative that was founded in 2010, aiming toward ending social acceptability of sexual harassment in Egypt. We started by launching an online interactive map using the technology, the open source Ushahidi, and we encourage women to write their stories on sexual harassment. In the first 3 years of launching HarassMap, the network or the map crashed because there was so many women who wants to tell the stories, tell what's happening to them. There was no other platform. There was no other way for women to tell the stories, and we were amazed and overwhelmed by the number of reports we have received. So I think from that regard, it has been very liberating for women. It gives voice for the voiceless. There is no way they can tell the stories. There have been stories about not being able to tell the incidents of sexual harassment to their families, to their spouse, because blame will come back to them. Women wouldn't be seen as the victim, but more the people, the person to be blamed. Perpetuator will never be pointed at. It would be the woman's clothes, the woman's attitude, the context, everything but the perpetuator. So the map provided a space for these women to come and tell their stories. During the revolution in 2011, and from after the first 18 days of revolution and throughout 2013, the map have received a considerable number of reports of sexual harassment, assault, and incidents of rape that have been conducted by either thugs, organized groups, or the state towards women. The map, among very few other platforms, were the only places where women can talk and can tell the stories of violence that's happened to them, because a lot of this violence have been happening from the state. So how can you go and report the state to the state? So the map was very empowering tools. Very quickly, I want to share with you one of the reports. You can all see it online, and these reports, if you click at them, and it's in English, and it's in Arabic, sorry, and I tried to translate some of the words in English, and it's basically said on the corner of Muhammad Mahmoud, which is a very popular street in downtown where a lot of the conflict took place. I was raped. I wanted to practice my right as a citizen and to be politically active, and I was raped. I was raped simply because I'm a woman who dared to be in the public space practicing her political right. I was raped. And the reports goes on in details of what's happened to her, how she was raped, how they tore her clothes, and so on. So in that sense, the map become a very powerful tool for these voiceless women to come and tell the stories. The way the reports was written, specifically these reports that was received during the revolution, was very detailed. Basically as a way of documenting it. Because I know my time is up, I was telling you that how the map can be as much as liberating. I wouldn't use the word oppressing, but I would use the word frustrating. Because as much as we gather these reports and how much we help women to vent and tell the stories, we can't reach out to these women. We can't provide the support they might need because it's an anonymous reporting system. So in that sense, ICT can be sometimes also frustrating to us and frustrating to this woman, because they are not having like the reaction or getting the right or taking this to case or even having the needed psychological support they want. I think my time is up, and I would keep the discussion on the online offline to a later stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Amel. Chat.
Yes. I just want to reinforce what Amel just said, and maybe to call up one of the infographic that I wanted to share you around the work that we have done. The work is our work around the Association for Progressive Communications. We have done work around violence against women since 2005. That's the first time we actually did research around, because we did notice that the incidences of hate, of cyber stalking, etc., was increasing. So we attempted to look at the these incidences, and that led to actually one of our longest running campaign, which is the Take Back the Tech campaign, which really is to reclaim technology to fight violence against women. So that has been ongoing. The idea really was to get ourselves, to use technology and let women and tell women that there are possibilities around using technology to fight violence. Then we did a research. Can we? I'm not sure if we can see the mapping, the first infographic. So we did the same thing, Ushahidi. We also used Ushahidi, and it's true. Sometimes it's like you have all of these reports, but then you can't know much about it, and also around the anonymity of it. So we did this in 7 countries, and we had about our findings are from 1,126 cases, and this is all around online violence. Because we wanted to understand what is the nature of online violence. How does it relate? How is it related or the same as offline violence? How does that is that the same in relation to the continuum of violence? And out of those, there are several findings, and I'm just going to look at highlight some of them. So majority of the cases of violence were someone known to the survivor. Actually, 40% were known to the survivor. Women from 18 to 30 years old and younger are the most vulnerable online. There are 3 general categories of women who experience violence: women in intimate relationships, women from a professional with a public profile, and women who are survivors of physical assault. Fourthly, emotional harm is 33% actually reported emotional harm or psychological harm. Facebook and mobile phones, 26% Facebook, 19% of mobile phones were the reported platforms. And less than half of the cases, so 41%, were reported to authorities. So in a way, this actually led us to then look at some analysis around this experience. And there was 4 things, that came up. And one is the first point I was saying, that really this is not online violence. While it's not a new form, it's a continuum of violence against women. So intimate relationship, it's the same patterns. Intimate relationship, violence will continue online. There are, of course, cyber stalking is sexual harassment just online. It's similar. Women who experience sexual harassment offline will experience a similar kind. I mean, it just extends to the online environment. That's really what it is. Hate speech, misogyny, and in some cases, it becomes so much more. But I think because it's anonymous, and this comes to your point earlier, Joanna, about anonymity. Because it's anonymous, then in some cases, it becomes even worse online because men can get away with it, or harassers can get away with it. So I think those are some of the elements where, in terms of experience and research that we've done, and I guess later in the discussion I can tell you how we've used the research. These are all available on takebacktetech.net, and I'll invite you all to actually look at some of these summaries of the findings. We have a research that has been published recently, about a month ago. So that's one area. The other area is around sexual expression, and we did this work. We also did research in several countries. The reason being that we wanted to see how the internet has contributed to liberation, if you like, in the sense of sexual expression. And in all of the studies that we did, Lebanon, for example, was a case. Really, the internet was instrumental in the organizing of the lesbian movement or gay movement and the gay movement in Lebanon. So that was really documented in the research that we did. On the other hand, we also saw that some of the issues or that communities, marginalized communities, face is in relation to as what I said earlier, you know, the restrictions around sexual speech and the control over sexual bodies.
Chad, can I ask you to summarize maybe the next 10, 15 seconds, please?
Sure. I think so. Those were the two experiences that that I really wanted to share with you, because I do think that, again, in relation to offline and online, the control of women's bodies or sexuality is in fact one of the biggest issues. It's a continuum, again, that happens online.
Thank you so much. I think that was a very helpful segment, and as I'm speaking, I ask the audience member to start thinking about questions that you might have, because the next round of questions, we'll be happy to include some questions that you might have. So please start thinking and write your questions in the Q&A box in this Hangout. So thank you very much for that series of interventions, because I think it really brought down from your initial contribution some hard evidence and some real experience that shows that there is a demand, there's a reality here that a lot of these things are happening. There is online violence, there is offline violence, but the fact that violence against women, gender-based violence, is a reality is irrefutable. It's also interesting, Amel, when you said that sometimes it can be frustrating, because here you see a clear demand of coming forward from these victims to the point where it crashed your map initially. And so what kind of services, what kind of support can be offered to these people who are claiming their voice, not being handed their voice, but claiming their voice, telling their own stories? And I think that's a very interesting point. And Chat, your points about you know, this is really on a continuum. You know, it's different, but it's similar to other forms of violence, and I think that's very important to bear in mind. I was very interested to hear about your research findings that show, to really put some numbers towards and some evidence on different forms of vulnerability that people experience across different age groups. And Joanna, I think the real concrete examples that you brought forward of discrimination in various parts of the world through different means, gaming and the such, I think that brings a whole other angle that merits a lot of discussion. So I will leave it there, and let's see if there are any questions coming in from our audience. And if not, I will pose a question while we wait for our audience members to come up with their questions. So I'm gonna pose a question that's very, I think, topical and that's happened very recently. Oh, we have a comment from Ifat Gill, who just wanted to share that he is very much in agreement with Joanna's comment about there's a need to think about women as consumers and also creators in technology fields, which poses a challenge of teaching proper skills to enable that. And how can we build the capacity of women and girls who are interested to become creators in the ICT field? How can we build the capacities to do that? So why don't we put that out as a question? So what can be done to help inculcate or support this type of nurturing environment so that women and young girls can become more active as creators in the realm of ICTs and applications and gadgets, etc. Joanna, actually, you know what? Let's change it up. Why don't we start with Amel, and then we'll move to Joanna, and then Chat.
I actually don't see it as a separate in general. I see it as a form of empowerment, women empowerment, as everything is really linked. Programs that empower women in decision-making process, in being courageous in taking decision, in really in accessing education, and empowerment that counter the myth around the woman natural role is setting. And I remember, like, it's in my culture, like, don't go to engineering, it's 5 years, better finish in 4, so go to, for instance, commerce, and because you're gonna end up staying home and nurturing 2 kids. So in general, it's like working on empowerment of the woman. That's a key. That's a really, for me, a key. Working on making, closing the gender gap and encouraging women to be daring to conquer areas like technology, like physics, like everything. That what would end up. That's what would really lead to more women in developing the technology and contributing tremendously to the decreasing the gender the digital gap.
Great. Thank you very much, Amel. Joanna?
A moment. Yeah, I totally agree. Well, I totally agree with Amel. It's a mix of policies, no, of education, but also of fostering the curiosity of technologies and opening spaces. Like myself, I was surprised once. I opened a call for a digital security training, and most of the subscribers were women. And I was surprised because I was like, oh, how come? So maybe initiatives like that are missing, or even in the school, you know, opening spaces in maker spaces, hacker spaces, fostering people or women to submit proposals for those spaces. I'm a lawyer, but I'm pretty much interested in technology. So in the last years, I've been kind of invading this male spaces and having fun, actually, and learning a lot. So going to Chaos Communication Congress and all those environments, and you need to go there and even push the topic. No, last week I was in the Internet Engineer Task Force, which is the community that sets the basic standards for the internet. This is HTTP and so on. And of course, it's male-led mostly. There were very few women. But even going to those spaces and making that point, make people think about it, because sometimes they don't even notice that's male-led environment. So I think trying to interact and participate more in this field, even if it sometimes is weird, it's important action too.
Thank you, Joanna. Chat.
I think I just will add 2 things. One is to encourage and give space for girls to play, like boys do. I think, and that's really part of upbringing, part of how culture sees, you know, the culture that girls grow into. And so all these girls' tech days, and you know, like one of the most exciting things that I have come across is, you know, girls participating in making robots, for example. You know, these kinds of things, or the pie. You know, sort of coding is the other thing. And the other thing is second thing is putting resources into this. Putting resources and developing policy that really gives, you know, make spaces for girls and women in education. One of the trendy is actually that women and girls are women's participation in the in science and technology education is growing less and less. And that is because of the environment. That's number one. And number two, it's because women cannot. It is the kind of environment they're in. So I think that's the other thing. Reforms around that needs to happen to keep women in these careers, because it's a very, very challenging place.
I get to that. I wanted to thank Ifat again for her excellent question, and I think she's brought out some interesting points about empowerment, about the need for policies, I like this idea of opening spaces, but then invading and occupying spaces as well, which is not always easy, but important. And this emphasis on encouraging girls to play and to enjoy themselves and to see coding and things like that as something that's fun and that they want to do. I think that's really excellent, and that's a way to keep them there, which is what Chat was saying, like how can they kind of stay in this area. So thank you very much. We can come back to that later, but for now, let's move on to a question coming to us from Michael Clark. Michael is asking, with increasingly pervasive surveillance, some legal, some not, of our online lives, is there a concern that the protection afforded by anonymous engagement might be lost? So I'll just repeat that again in case, with increasingly pervasive surveillance, some legal, some not, of our online lives, is there a concern that the protection afforded by anonymous engagement might be lost? So, Joanna, given that you're somebody with strong legal expertise, I'm going to start with you, and then move to Chat, and then to Amel.
Yes and no. As a lawyer, the answer is always that. But very recent, the special rapporteur on freedom of expression is doing a report on encryption and anonymity. And for that, in partnership with Derechos Digitales, Web Foundation, we did a quick research in countries from Latin America to see the status of regulation on anonymity and encryption. And what we could see is that, yes, so surveillance practices or the goal for the state to be able to monitor or to get people in fear of terrorism, criminality, it's increasing. So it's more and more difficult to be anonymous online in one way, but in the other way, it's sometimes we have tools and it's difficult to break the anonymity. So I think our particular case here on hate speech and sexual speech, it's a delicate case in which how do we handle that? And most of the times you see that the police will say, oh, this is anonymous and we'll stop here, but it's not true. The technologies that we have today don't really allow you to be anonymous.
Great, thank you so much. Chat, would you care to comment on this question?
Yeah, look, I think I agree. I do agree with Joanna here. There are so many the technology can, if that's able to do it. But I think in cases where, I mean, we recently had a discussion, it was just recently in a conference where the discussion was around cybercrime. Cybercrime, which also has to do, and the differentiation of cybercrime and cybersecurity. And I think that also leads us to this question around, this whole notion of there is this threat of terrorism, and that there's always that states always will make makes this the excuse for more surveillance, and the need to really step this up. But the surveillance has been so massive that it doesn't differentiate around what is, there are some what is surveilled. And I do think that one of the things that we need maybe a lot more education on is around what the difference is of cyberterrorism, which is really a small portion. So really, I mean, there's not much. But the response has been this massive surveillance. And what's the difference with cybercrime? Most of the reports in our countries, for example, that we get, is that number one, cybercrime is about ordinary crime, day-to-day fraud. Most of the reports, for example, is part of the work that we do here in relation to looking at, finding out around cyberstalking, finding some redress around it, is talking to our cybercrime unit in the Philippines, for example, because this is part of what we do. And what they say to us are two things. The most common things that they really look at or they respond to is number one, fraud, and number two, reports of online harassment. And this is the bulk of what they have to deal with. So I do think that the excuse around surveillance because of cyber terrorism, we need to have a lot more discussion around that.
Thank you, Chat. Amel, any comments you'd like to add?
One comment with this is not a legal expert on how to do things, but there must be a way around it without really kind of losing this anonymous engagement. My big worry is how the violence against women discourses online are very alarming, seriously alarming, and leading to the normalization of violence in our everyday life. That is a real issue, because as Chad said, this is a continuum of violence. There is no kind of clear distinct between what is online and what is offline, because the online become after the offline. In this interesting study that have been done on Twitter, and we know that Twitter is one of the most less censored platforms. 40% of the tweets between December 2013 and February 2014 included the word rape. 10,000. I'm sorry, it's actually 100,000. I'm so sorry. So imagine if, although 29% of this tweet is used in reports, and 12% are used as non-direct threat, a metaphoric form, but that would lead to the normalization process. That the word rape, because so easy and so familiar and so normalized, that it actually will increase in the real physical life. So these are things that we put in the way to anonymous engagement, and we weight that to this. We can't just measure anonymous engagement in a vacuum. You have to also see what things that have been caused. And also, I'm not encouraging surveillance. I'm actually encouraging more ways of online engagement to stop hate speeches and violence against women.
Great, thank you so much. So let's move on to the next question, because I think some of these questions that we've received from the audience actually segue very nicely into our third of three questions that we have for the three of you. And then I'll ask the audience members again, please keep thinking about questions, because we'll have another round of open questions that we'll be opening after this one. So the next question is really about what is the way forward? What comes next? Based on your experiences to date, based on the policies that are in place, based on the laws that are in place, the work that's happening at the grassroots level all the way up to the UN multilateral levels, is it possible to design strategies or approaches to protect women and to change social norms and behaviors? What is the best path? So your reflections on this very general, very open question about what do you think the way forward is from this point? So let me go back to the original order of starting with chat, and then moving to Amel, and then Joanna.
I think I'll look at three things, right? Number four. The first is building. I think it's a combination, the strategies. One would be building resilience. The second would be really research, because a lot of this is new, and a lot of this being formed. Policies is being formed, but there needs to be some evidence-based research really towards changing in policies. And policies, I'm not only talking about policies in relation to state policies, but also in relation to community standards of private sector, terms of service of private sector. And the third is really changing attitudes and behavior. Because the social norms are not changed by just policies. I mean, policies really are enabling environment, but to a large extent, if attitudes and behaviors are not changed, if misogyny, if we are not able to change how misogynist attitudes in society, it won't we're going to not there won't be a significant change in social norms. So, for example, one of the things we do, and I would like to, if you could just show us the slide that I did prepare, is that one of the things we're doing is looking at in our research, is looking at some roadmaps to build resilience for women. Roadmaps in the sense of, okay, if you're being cyberstalked, what do you do? So this is on our site. And this is really the roadmap in terms of cyberstalking. What does it mean? What is cyberstalking? What kinds of legal remedies would you have? These are real stories from the research that we've done. So we sort of did it in a comic so that people can relate to it a lot more. So these are real stories, and we do the roadmap. So that's the one thing we do. So we did one for cyberstalking. That's really important. You need to really build resilience for women and girls. Second, evidence-based research. Two things around the research is the terms of service of private sector. One of the things we have done, in fact, is really talk to companies like Facebook. We participated in a campaign where we looked at their community standards. A lot of women complaining about misogynistic content, about harassment, etc., and asking Facebook to, number one, improve their community standards, and the second is to implement them. Because they would say, we can't because this is actually humorous. Women being violated is humorous. Things like that. So there was that, and there was campaigning around it, around terms of service. This is actually looking at the role of intermediaries. And this is where I think Joanna's point around hate speech, to some extent, and content restriction. On one point, you don't really want to have a regime where it's easy to restrict content, because that really contravenes freedom of expression. On the other hand, you need to have some intermediary responsibility to define what that means, because corporates should have responsibility and should be able to implement, their standards or their policies around hate speech, around and in relation to the content they use. Legal remedies are again, these are being defined. In some places, in the work that we do, we were looking at policies and what can be used. And in fact, I think in number 5, can we maybe show number 5? I think we will probably see here some of the policies. We've identified some of the policies that we have that are available. Actually, sorry, this is the cyberstalking. And if we go down this is an infographic, and it's available on our site. Not this one. Sorry, this is actually the previous one. If you could look at that, the previous slide. Anyway, so you'll see you'll see what kinds of remedies there are, whether they're universal standards or whether they are local, local policies. And I think the third is definitely changing attitudes and behavior. And that's really about campaigning. That's really about, I think someone said, I think it was Amel, to get a lot more women out there. Sort of contravening speech, hate speech with more speech that will change the paradigm in the discussion. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Chat. Amel, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
I would add a couple of things to what Chad has said. Definitely, I want very quickly to stress the developing of mechanism. I wouldn't use the word surveillance to stop hate speech and online sexual harassment, which is very, very frequent and prevalent in online, is something that we should see as a way forward. Encouraging women to use ICT. It is well known that more men than women uses and accesses ICT. Train women to use ICT, which we bring us back to the online, offline activities. You want to train women. You want to actually physically go there and train women. You want to raise women awareness on the benefit and the services that they can access from online platforms. You want to increase the women's access to the ICT tools. You want to encourage also women to be developers, and this is what we talked about, and occupy the spaces that is mainly dominated by men. So by having women developers, they will be more catering to women's technical needs and develop more gender-sensitive platforms and really closing the digital gap. I mean, these are very bullet points that I can think of that can actually contribute and help us in the way forward.
Great, thank you very much, Amel. Joanna.
I agree with all the points. I'm not sure if I have anything else to add, but I think that's research in one way, policy, which includes empowerment of women, but also addressing intermediary liability. I like the position of fighting hate speech with more speech, and I totally support that. But then we go for a plus of being able to enforce the law when it's a case of crime, and plus education to try to change social norms, but also to foster the appropriation of technologies within girls since the early stages. So if I have a daughter, she'll play with robots. For sure.
Me too. That's great. So I'm going to open it up to the audience for one last quick round of questions. We only have 5 minutes left. If there's a burning question, we would love to hear from you. Otherwise, we will start to wrap up this debate. But before I do that, so let me wait for a couple of seconds to see if we have any questions coming in. Otherwise, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give, we've covered a lot of ground during this hangout, that's for sure. So I want to give each of the three of you 1 minute. We just talked about the way forward, I realize, and we commented. But if you like, and you can pass if you like, but if you would like to have 1 minute to summarize your comments, you can share really whatever you want in relation to the topic. Then we will move to some other comments to close and then continue the conversation on the blog. So why don't we start with Joanna and then move to Amel and then Chat. And just please keep to 1 minute, please.
Okay. No, I think that even exercises like that, what we are doing here now, it's already something very important to foster and to keep doing. Bring all the women to talk and to have the different aspects and challenges from the grassroots to the legal to the technology part. So I think that's a way to go, and that's pretty much what I'm interested to do in the days to come. So thanks a lot for the opportunity and for a very insightful conversation here.
Thanks, Joanna. Amel?
Joanne, thank everybody for such an opportunity. I think it's a great endeavor, and we should definitely continue doing more of that. I think I want to end on a note that I would like in the future to see ICT as tools that gives voice to the voiceless and give access to the underprivileged. I want them to really to have ICT as the tools that really bring down the gender gap. And I don't want there's a very popular quote that is very much attributed to Margaret Atwood that says, "Men are afraid of being laughed at women, but women are afraid that men will kill them." So sometimes I feel that's the case on the internet. And where the most important thing, women are really very worried about being stalking, very worried about their safety, very worried about the anonymity. And because of these things, and because of the continuum of the violence, they are very much restricted in their participation on online forums.
Thank you very much, Amel. Chat.
So, yes, I think what I want to say, this last point, is this is how we want to change the conversation. So it's not about violence. So it becomes more empowering. So imagine we started this conversation around imagine a feminist internet, and we've got a hashtag imagine feminist internet. And I do think, and we've got 10, 11, 15 principles. And I really invite you to come and look at the evolving principles. We are having discussions around these principles, and to really define for ourselves what a feminist internet is. And it's a challenge for all of us, I think, to do that. And in that sense, hopefully it will change how people behave and perceive and shape the internet. And that's how I would like to.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you, all of you, and thank you to our audience as well. I was meant to do a summary of the debate, but I don't think I can add anything else to what the three of you have just said, so I will leave it at that. Thank you again, and I will pass the microphone over to Bruce to officially close this debate. Bruce.
Thank you, Chadley. Just a couple of thoughts I'd like to reflect upon and connect to the larger theme which brought us here today in the first instance. I really like the idea and the insight of how what happens online and offline fit together, this idea of a continuum of violence towards women, that what happens in both spaces actually reinforce each other, and the need to call out inappropriate behavior in both spaces. I really like the observation of connecting this with Amartya Sen's views of development as freedom. That this concept seems very abstract at times, how ICTs are contributing to human development and capability. But we've just heard from 4 different continents very practical examples of how that is happening, how technology is both an enabler and inhibitor of the realization of those rights, and just a simple ability to walk the streets safely, if you will. I started by saying this is a banner year. We're rethinking what development means. And in many ways, this discussion shows that is now so much more beyond aid and just reduction of poverty. We've heard about these very challenging problems facing our societies. And even though the conditions in the Middle East and North Africa, Asia, Latin America, North America are very different, we are facing some common challenges. There are unique stories that have come out from this. So international development has a future, is one key insight for me. But in this future, we need to be listening to and learning from experiences around the world and the voices of people who are experiencing this. So where we started was saying, what is the past 60 years of thinking on development been? Realizing how that has been enriched by the real life experiences. And indeed, where the experience is heading is almost ahead of our thinking of development, and we redefine how we understand these issues moving forward. So again, I can only reiterate my thanks and respect for Chat, Amal, Joanna, and particularly Chiku, who took on the formidable role of moderating this. I invite all of you, speakers and audience, and those who will see this later, to continue the conversation online appropriately, but also beyond it. So there will be this video available both through YouTube and the website developmentideas.info. There'll be supplementary material there. I encourage you to all visit the websites of the organizations that our speakers represented, and to continue carrying on this conversation with your friends, family, and those that are seized with these ideas. Thinkers and practitioners are taking some brave steps and bringing us what is the leading edge of development thinking and practice from around the world. We had a sample of that today, and I'm thankful for being part of this. So with that, thank you, and we bring this one to a close.